Hello, I'm FXToyCat, and what an insane question. Obviously, in a world where Console Edition had existed alongside of, or instead of Bedrock, it would be the version people would play, and we'd be excited for Minecraft PlayStation 5 Edition today. However, the question wasn't, was Bedrock better than Console? Because the answer was mostly no. I was very lucky, not just that I had the block that I wanted for today's build hanging around, but also that I got this 8-year-old video recommended where I was talking about the new features coming to Bedrock on console, and the top comment on that video was who thinks this version is worse, and 800 people liked it to agree. But what about actually? Well, hear me out. We just saw the console files, and there was not a single PDF file in there, unlike that other link. Instead, there was just a bunch of code, and what we learned was that console was just ported Java. Java itself is very spaghetti coded, and both versions worked kind of well together with that logic, but did it actually have a future? I mean, think about Caves and Cliffs, the Never update, and even the Garden Awakens. Would these have worked well on the console? Hello, I'm IvyXToyCat, I'm saying again for the second time, and I am obviously Legacy Console's #1 glazer, but I'm also the world's #1 contrarian, and if you believe I'm not, then you're wrong. But what's interesting is the fact that I really actually find these two things to conflict with each other, and that's why I figured it'd be an interesting discussion for today's Let's Play, because I'm going to be building this super old classic build. And while I do that, I'm going to be answering 3 big questions that I've gotten ready for myself to help us guide ourselves through this conversation. Because I think the first big one is, what does Bedrock have that console doesn't? And it's something really useful to hear, because in my head, my immediate thought is like, yeah, well, the reverse is so true. Minecraft console, even from 2014, had so many features that both Java and Bedrock still haven't bothered copying. I mean, the super flat Nether is the biggest example, but even looking at future versions with mini games, these are beloved features that they're just not bothering to implement. It seems as though you could hire a team, even the same team. I bet 4J would be available for the right price, but you could hire a team to make these things that people love, and yet they're simply not doing it. But we're also ignoring the inverse situation, where if we were playing on the Legacy Console Edition to this day and it had been made for PlayStation 5, there'd be many features that we would be actively missing. The big ones being infinite worlds. Those could not be made within the 4J philosophy of making console versions that run 99.9% of the time. There is a chat inside of Legacy Console, but they never wanted to expose it. They believed that just didn't fit in a console game, and so no commands either as a result of that, and there are so many other tiny things that come as a result of this. Take, for example, vibrant visuals, or, Bedrock, by rewriting the game from scratch, managed to add add-ons, which I'm not an add-on player, but everyone in my life, even the most, pure survival people, are like, yeah, when I play with friends, we put on, only 1 or 2 add-ons. People love add-ons. They worked out how to do Java mods, but with full compatibility with each other, and which you can just one-click install from inside the game, including on consoles. That is a major achievement that, again, I am not going to be yelling about because it's not really for me. The sorts of add-ons I enjoy are weird, as you can tell from the ones that our team has put out. But yeah, I think that this is something which Bedrock has that console does not, and it's something you forget about when we imagine, what could console have done? They would have gone in a different direction. A better direction in terms of people who love mini games and love, controller-focused features, but still something important to note. So now I think the second question is Bedrock the main version of the game now? This is one I want to ask, because the reason Bedrock has managed to do all these different things is because they just fundamentally rebuilt the game from scratch. This is insane when you think about it. Minecraft, we've now seen that Minecraft Java and Minecraft console shared a lot in common, not just by, willpower. They didn't just want to make Minecraft Java on consoles, but they specifically took the code and ported it over. And this matches what we see from, early Notch tweets talking about who will be porting the game. They wanted to make a port in Minecraft Console Edition, whereas in Minecraft Bedrock, they wanted to do an entire code rebuild. And a code rebuild is what they did. So when they, instead of, again, Console Edition took the Java code and just made it work on consoles, whereas the Bedrock Edition takes something they see on Java and they rebuild it from scratch. And that has huge implications. I mean, compare it to what we're building here. I am building this weird windmill, watermill, I guess we'd call it, and I'm building this by slowly but surely having to, you know, like build it by looking at it by sight, but the way they built it in the first place was by jamming, right? They just were like, yeah, well, let's build it and it'll look like this roughly. We'll place blocks here and there and then everywhere. But like, if you think about it this way, when we place a block here, we have to place upwards just like that. If we try to place a block on the side of a block like this, it would go sideways. And so our tools are fundamentally different. It is harder for us to build this than it was for them to build it back in the day because our tool set is different. And even harder than that, well, you know, like therefore certain bugs aren't replicated. But also even harder than that, think about how this impacts like yeah. Sorry, my brain's gone a little muddled by making sure I'm getting this structure the right size. I think we've got it right, though. But, you know, like, even harder than that is the fact that if we really think about how, you know, like, they had to rebuild it from scratch, it means that certain bugs wouldn't get ported automatically. If they want to, they have to add bugs manually, and that's famously why quasi-connectivity doesn't exist on Bedrock. It was a bug on Java, and so when they rewrote the code, they didn't add it, but to many, that feels like a lost feature. There are many Bedrock features that are technically better made that don't feel that way. And there are many minor bugs that if they had existed on Java would have been accepted a long time ago, but because this is the new version of Minecraft, it feels weird to see them there. And that is, I think, the biggest like struggle that Minecraft Bedrock has, is it's becoming, you know, like it's the version of the game that's on far more platforms that far more people have access to, but it's the version of the game that feels weird by virtue of coming second. Is that going to change as time goes on and as far, you know, a bunch of people remember early Minecraft but then know that it had so many changes and now they remember Minecraft Bedrock just as well? Maybe, but that's why I want to go into our third big question, which is kind of the comparison of Bedrock versus Java in so many different ways, because I think that although we're talking about console versus Bedrock, really it is, this last week has really clarified in my mind that it's an extension of the Minecraft Java argument. By the way, I've realized I built this entire thing a block too low, and it is breaking my brain to realize what we have to do about this. But every one of these planks can stay if I just replace the bottom of them with oak. I'll think about it in the morning, okay? You know, actually, let's skip ahead a little bit. This is going to break my brain, and so I'll let you benefit from super fast mode. Whoa, lower, it's all happening in crazy speed, but only for you. This is actually an editing for me. I'm just seeing it exactly how it is normally right now. Whoa, crazy, and okay, there we go. This is exactly where we have ended up. I worked out the entire problem is solvable by moving everything down a block. That is to say, everything here makes perfect sense if we assume that the ground level is one block below sea level. So we just start placing our blocks down here, and then later we just have to remove the the additional water that's on top here. You know, it's funny, this is the exact same mistake I made with the tutorial world, assuming, again, building on top of water, but forgetting that the water is not the block itself that is the base, but instead should be one block below the base. It's funny that I can make this mistake multiple times. But you know what else is kind of funny? The fact that, yeah, this is going to tie into my road system. And so from in front of this, there's going to be a block, and we're just going to have our big underwater, our thing is going to go over here, and then it's going to go over here a little bit to match how it looks in the real life. And then after going over here a little bit, it's going to go right back in to the pathway over there, but I don't have enough blocks, it's fine. So yeah, this entire thing actually makes perfect sense and is gonna be wonderful. It just requires a bit more work. And honestly, if I can come back into what I was saying, I think that the you know, the situation that we're in when it comes to Bedrock versus Java, I think the arguments that people are having about it are kind of this same thing happening again. So let's place a block there, and then this is like our little fireplace. There's going to be a couple of blocks of Nevrac. I'm not going to light them on fire yet, but then on top of those couple of blocks of Nevrac to keep the fire in, there is some glass, and that's not how I wanted to place the glass, but it's totally fine. This is a fireplace, 2011 style. And now we just have to build the blocks that go up above the behind of this here, because the back part of this is just entirely wood. There's no logs here whatsoever. Just good old-fashioned planks. Although we'll have to place the logs underneath this later. I now have to go and chop a bunch of trees just so I can take the underside of this build that most people aren't going to look at anyway and replace the planks with logs, because otherwise the build is not authentic, and that is important to me. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of Minecraft Java versus Bedrock as a categoric argument, because console versus Bedrock is basically making the same argument. That is to say, the Java edition is the one that has existed for far longer, if we're being honest and real with ourselves, just factual, I guess, of ourselves. But at the same time, existing longer doesn't make something better by default, at least in my opinion. I feel like you kind of have to earn that additionally on top. So, okay, actually, we would benefit from placing some blocks back there so that we could actually stack up to where we need to go. But instead, I'll just place these and move onwards from there. Anyway, I think that the console versus Bedrock argument is kind of just another repeat of that same Java Bedrock argument. That is to say, see, I can't place the log there that I want to, but we'll just place all of that in the same way, and it all works out to the same place. But yeah, it's a repeat of the same argument in that you've got to have the debate over, is this the better one because it functions better right now and it does what we need it to and blah blah blah, or is it a bit more complicated and actually, oh no, this, I think I did want that. Yeah, I do want there to be some planks all the way along this row. And then I want to have, except from where this comes through. And then I have this come up and go through and go all the way over to there, including to that corner that it currently doesn't. And then also it's going to go up here. And in this gap here goes my light grey wool. Okay, yeah, nice. Okay, sorry. But as I was saying, I feel like the debate is kind of just having one that we've had many times before. Again, it's having the debate about whether it makes sense to rebuild everything from the ground up or not. And indeed, I think really most people, if you really were to say like, oh yeah, did you know, Microsoft Windows, the platform most people used to use for their computers. I mean, technically nowadays people use Android, but therefore technically Linux. But there used to be Windows was the reason that Microsoft was so successful is because they built MS-DOS, the Microsoft Disk Operating System. That was their big successful thing. But at some point they decided, well, this doesn't make sense to keep building on top of anymore. This isn't like, you can't do this forever. Logically, at some point we have to say that we're doing this again. And they did. They made Windows NT, if I'm not mistaken. But they made a brand new version of Windows. And for a little bit, it was like, but MS-DOS is so good. And the same with RuneScape. RuneScape started with what's now called RuneScape Classic. And they just built everything again from scratch. They made a brand new RuneScape game. They called it RuneScape 2 at the time, but now it's called Old School RuneScape, funnily enough, because people like it more than RuneScape 3. But, they took a game and they were like, it already functions, but I reckon it could function a little bit better. And so building something from scratch is a really bold call. Doing something properly, rather than just doing the minimum thing to get it out, is a really bold call because it means that there are years of stuff not happening. But is it the right call to make with Bedrock? I think that, honestly, the answer should be an unequivocal yes. But I think what really happens is we kind of have a debate as a community about, are Microsoft making the right call in terms of just the, solely on the angle of all of this extra development effort of making the game again from scratch in a brand new code base, in a brand new improved, maybe you could say way, maybe you could say not improved way, but like, is building the entire game again from scratch a worthwhile decision? Is something everyone should say yes to? But the truth is, the goals that have been prioritized are probably not the goals that get the community fired up. I think there's a bunch of people that could be really easily convinced if you say, heck yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to build new Minecraft, and what's going to make it so good is it's going to have way more features. It's going to have the ability to render all these different dimensions. It's going to have, if it was all focused into gameplay for the vanilla game, people would go crazy for the stuff that Bedrock could do by now. But instead, all of that additional effort that comes from refactoring the entire game goes into like, oh yeah, the rendering engine is more efficient, and so you can have extra chunks of render distance on high-end devices, but crucially, it will perform at all on lower-end devices. That is something people really like. Okay, so here's our build now. I built myself a nice little vertical slice to show you that, look, it's the windmill minus the actual mill from the from that classic old world. We do still now need to actually build the windmill to the right of it, and obviously now it has to be lowered a whole block down into the ground. Whole nightmare here. But yeah, the reason I'm making sure we put the windmill here is because it's going to be essential for, well, this is my third big build of the year. I've mentioned this goal before, but I want to build something new, you know, like fungibly, tangentially, actually, I'm just using a lot of words now, but I want to build something actually new in my world each month. That is my target for 2026, and this is something that ties into an idea I've had forever. I just think it'd be the perfect place to show off something that relates to efficiency in Minecraft. But speaking of efficiency in Minecraft, this video needs to be efficient, which means we need to come back to our main point, which is to, I think, come back and really, clarify that I mourn the loss of what a legacy console could have been. By now, and we know that if legacy console existed and wasn't replaced by Bedrock, well, it would have just happened a few years later, when the correct moment should have been there. I think that, honestly, if Microsoft had kept legacy console around, it would have forced them to actually make sure that the game was ready for the Switch. Like, that is to say, Bedrock should have been better in every single way, such that players were begging for it, rather than it coming out in a beta and people going, ooh, this is a bit wonky, this is worse than console, and then them saying, well, here's the solution, you have to download the update. But like, the weird thing in my opinion is that Bedrock is like, it's like the Windows NT switch from MS-DOS, or it's like RuneScape 2 to RuneScape. It should have been this massive improvement that everyone looks back on and goes like, whoa, can you imagine? Imagine if we were still playing Legacy. The fact that no one is looking back at Minecraft Pocket Edition and saying, yeah, that's the version that it should have lived on, and the fact that only a few Java players look back at, pre-combat update Minecraft or, 1.8 Minecraft, the fact that there's only a few people in that camp, in my opinion, is healthy for a game. Whereas an unhealthy game, I feel like Bedrock is a little bit closer to RuneScape 3, where it has a bunch of people who like it, and, it has a direction of travel that might seem positive, but it still is very much you have to squint and look at your eyes. The fact that I can't finish this video with a definitive reason why Bedrock was better than console, the fact that it's not clear from looking at that title, like, oh yeah, this is obviously how it's going to be, is in my opinion the biggest failure of Bedrock, if I can have one. And so yeah, I think that Minecraft building things from scratch and making a refactored, safer, in theory, less buggy version of the game is something that is great. But yeah, just like how I've made this build and it's got all sorts of funky little wonky details, Minecraft Bedrock has a lot of funky and wonky details and not enough things that people look at and say, I love this. That is changing, but the fact that, I think the fact that if you look at my last video where I spoke about like, should I quit Bedrock? The fact that a bunch of people are like, yes, I've been thinking about this exact same thing, rather than, no, why would you do that? I think that this is something that Minecraft probably should work on. I think that having a hardcore user base and a casual player base that is split is not a good thing, but maybe that's just me. For now, all I can say is that it's not quite finished, but my vertical slice is quite nice, and I hope you all enjoyed this video for the same reason, because Minecraft Bedrock is not better than console in every single way, but it is something that I like to play, and I'll continue to do so on this channel, but that won't stop me from going back for some nostalgia, starting very shortly. Anyway, thank you, goodbye.